Judge Judy had warned dishonest people thousands of times. Most of them lowered their eyes. Some became defensive. A few even apologized before the evidence surfaced. But on that unforgettable morning, Karen Holloway did something no one in the courtroom expected. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh. A loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the courtroom after Judge Judy calmly said, "Be very careful. The next 5 minutes will determine whether anyone believes another word you say." Karen leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and smirked. "Oh, please," she shook her head. "You don't scare me." The gallery fell silent. Even the bailiff glanced toward Judge Judy, waiting for some kind of reaction. None came. Judge Judy simply removed her reading glasses, folded them neatly onto the bench, and looked directly at Karen without saying another word. People who had watched her courtroom for years recognized that look. She wasn't angry. She wasn't offended. She was waiting. Experienced judges understand that arrogance has a dangerous habit. Given enough time, it usually destroys itself. Karen mistook that silence for weakness. She smiled toward the audience sitting behind her, almost as if she had already won. "This whole thing is ridiculous," she said. "I've dealt with managers, attorneys, and corporate investigators. You're just trying to intimidate me." Judge Judy calmly replied, "No." She paused just long enough for every person in the room to feel the weight of the moment. "I'm giving you one final opportunity to tell the truth before the evidence speaks for you." Karen laughed again, louder this time. "I'll take my chances." A faint murmur spread across the courtroom. The plaintiff, Michael Bennett, slowly tightened his grip around an old leather document case resting beside his chair. He never interrupted. He never smiled. He simply watched Karen with the tired expression of someone who had already spent months trying to explain the truth to people who refused to listen. Judge Judy noticed the worn corners of the document case immediately, years of use, carefully protected. People don't preserve things like that unless what's inside means far more than money. Before this unbelievable courtroom story goes any further, make sure you're subscribed for more unforgettable courtroom dramas where truth always catches up with arrogance. And if this is your first time watching, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this case is about to become something no one inside that courtroom expected. Michael had filed what looked like a simple civil lawsuit. On paper, it involved a failed retail partnership, missing inventory, and nearly $80,000 in disputed losses. Karen insisted she had done absolutely nothing wrong. According to her, Michael was a bitter former business partner trying to blame her for his own mistakes. "He failed," she confidently told the court. "Now he wants my money." Judge Judy looked down at the court file. The paperwork told one story. Michael's quiet demeanor suggested another. Then there was one final item sitting on the clerk's table, a plain white evidence box, no labels, no markings. Only a small chain of custody seal across the lid. Judge Judy had not opened it, not yet. Truth doesn't become more convincing because it's revealed quickly. Sometimes it becomes unforgettable because it's revealed at exactly the moment someone believes they're untouchable. Karen glanced toward the sealed box and chuckled. "I hope that's your big surprise." Judge Judy looked at her calmly. "It isn't." Karen's smile widened. "Then you've already lost." Judge Judy didn't answer. Instead, she quietly turned one page inside the court file. She stopped at a single sentence highlighted in yellow. After reading it, she looked toward Michael, then back to Karen. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Judge Judy asked a question so simple that it sounded almost harmless. "Mrs. Holloway," Karen answered confidently. "Yes, before we discuss the missing inventory," Judge Judy rested one hand lightly on the sealed evidence box. "I'd like you to explain why your own company's security system recorded something completely different from the story you just told under oath." Karen's smile disappeared, only for a second, but Judge Judy saw it, and she knew exactly what that fleeting expression meant. Karen had just remembered something something she desperately hoped had been erased before anyone else could see it. The courtroom remained silent after Judge Judy's question. Karen Holloway didn't answer immediately. It wasn't because she didn't hear the question. It was because, for the first time that morning, she was trying to remember exactly what her company's security system had captured. Judge Judy noticed the hesitation. Real confusion usually asks for clarification, confidence searches for an escape. Karen finally forced a smile. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Judge Judy nodded calmly. "We'll find out." She didn't touch the evidence box. Not yet. Instead, she turned toward the plaintiff. "Mr. Bennett." Michael stood slowly, carrying the old leather document case with both hands. It wasn't expensive. The stitching had faded. The handle had been repaired years earlier with dark thread that didn't quite match the original leather. Judge Judy noticed every detail. People who protect worn belongings usually understand the value of things that cannot simply be replaced. Michael placed the case gently on the evidence table. "I'm not here because of the money," he said quietly. Karen laughed under her breath. "That's convenient." Judge Judy didn't even look at her. "Continue, Mr. Bennett." Michael opened the case. Inside were neatly organized folders, receipts, purchase orders, shipping, confirmations, and entry reports. Every document sat inside protective sleeves, arranged by date. Nothing looked hurried. Nothing looked staged. The narrator understood why this mattered. People preparing lies often organize stories. People protecting truth organize evidence. Judge Judy lifted the first folder. "When did you and Mrs. Holloway begin working together?" "Almost 6 years ago." "What kind of business?" "We operated a specialty home decor warehouse. I handled purchasing and supplier contracts. Karen managed retail operations and inventory." Judge Judy nodded. "So on paper, this appears to be a disagreement over missing merchandise." Michael shook his head. "No, Your Honor." He paused. "That's only what it became." The courtroom grew still. What was it really about? Michael reached into the document case once more. Instead of another business record, he carefully removed a faded photograph. It showed two people standing in front of an empty warehouse years earlier. One was Michael. The other was Karen. Both were smiling. The warehouse behind them had almost no shelves, no products, no decorations, just possibilities. Judge Judy studied the picture. "When was this taken?" "The day we signed our first lease." Karen looked away. Michael smiled sadly. "We built everything together." The narrator let that truth settle. Sometimes the smallest lawsuits carry the heaviest betrayals. This case wasn't born inside a courtroom. It was born inside years of trust. Judge Judy returned the photograph. "What changed?" Michael took a slow breath. "Our business started growing." He glanced briefly toward Karen. So did the pressure. Karen immediately interrupted. He couldn't keep up. Judge Judy held up one finger. "You'll have your turn." Karen leaned back again, visibly irritated. Michael continued. "About 18 months ago, inventory reports stopped matching supplier invoices." Judge Judy looked interested. "Explain." "We were buying products that never appeared in the warehouse." "And what did you do?" "I assumed it was a bookkeeping mistake." Judge Judy nodded. "A reasonable assumption." Michael continued. "So I started double-checking every shipment." He placed another folder on the table. Inside were dozens of inventory reconciliation sheets. Each page had handwritten notes in blue ink. Judge Judy flipped through them carefully. Every missing shipment had one thing in common: Karen's approval signature. She looked toward Karen. "Did you authorize these inventory adjustments?" Karen answered immediately. "Of course." "Were they accurate?" "Yes." Michael quietly spoke. "No." Karen glared at him. Judge Judy looked between them. The courtroom could feel the tension growing. This was no longer a disagreement about accounting. It was becoming a story about trust quietly falling apart, one document at a time. Judge Judy asked one final question. "When did you first realize this wasn't a simple mistake?" Michael reached into the leather case again. This time his hands hesitated. He slowly removed a small brass warehouse key attached to an old blue keychain. He stared at it for several seconds before answering. The morning this key stopped opening our own warehouse. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Judy looked up. You were locked out? Michael nodded. Without warning. Karen folded her arms. I changed the locks. Judge Judy turned toward her. Before dissolving the partnership? Karen hesitated. Yes, and without notifying him? Another pause. Yes. Judge Judy made one quiet note in the margin of her file. People rarely lose everything in one dramatic moment. More often, they lose it one calculated decision at a time. She rested her hand on the sealed white evidence box once again. The lock change explained how Michael had been kept outside. But it didn't explain what had happened inside the warehouse after he was gone. According to the security system logs sitting inside that box, the cameras had continued recording for another 48 hours. And those recordings were about to reveal exactly who had emptied the missing inventory and why Karen had laughed when Judge Judy warned her. Judge Judy looked at the old brass warehouse key resting on the evidence table. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't polished. Its edges were worn smooth from years of daily use. Yet somehow it had become the emotional center of the case. Michael Bennett quietly slid it back across the table. That key opened our first warehouse for almost 6 years. He paused. The morning it stopped working was the morning I realized I hadn't just lost access to a building. He looked toward Karen. I had lost my business. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Judy understood the difference immediately. People rarely fight this hard over property alone. They fight because someone took away years of work, trust, and identity. This case was never really about missing inventory, the narrator reflected. It was about someone discovering that a partnership had quietly become a takeover. Judge Judy turned her attention back to Karen Holloway. Mrs. Holloway. Karen straightened confidently. Yes, you changed every warehouse lock without notifying your business partner. I had every right. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. According to whom? Karen didn't hesitate. Our accountant told me I could. Judge Judy calmly reached for the partnership agreement. I've already read it. She opened to a highlighted paragraph. This agreement requires written consent from both managing partners before either party can restrict operational access. Karen's confidence faltered. My attorney said, Judge Judy interrupted gently. I didn't ask what someone may have told you. She looked directly at Karen. I'm asking whether you obtained written consent. Karen stared at the table. No. Judge Judy wrote a single word in her notes. Experienced judges understand that people often hide large betrayals behind small technicalities. Karen quickly tried to recover. It didn't matter because Michael had already stopped contributing. Michael quietly shook his head. Judge Judy noticed. Mr. Bennett. He stood. Did you stop working? No. What happened after the locks were changed? Michael opened another folder. Inside were printed emails. Every message showed him requesting access to the warehouse. Every reply came from Karen. Each one said essentially the same thing. We'll contact you when it's convenient. Inventory is being reviewed. Asterisk. You don't need to come in today. I'll handle operations. Judge Judy slowly placed the papers into chronological order. For nearly 3 weeks, Karen had delayed every request. The pattern was impossible to ignore. When someone cannot remove a partner legally, they sometimes try to remove them practically. Karen folded her arms. He wasn't helping, Judge Judy asked calmly. If that were true, she tapped the emails. Why keep telling him to come back later instead of ending the partnership properly? Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. Michael quietly reached back into the leather document case. This time, he removed a small notebook. Unlike the organized business records, this notebook looked personal. Judge Judy noticed handwritten supplier names. Delivery schedules at Pope birthdays. Maintenance reminders on the final page, a sentence written years earlier. Never build a business with someone you wouldn't trust with your house key. Judge Judy looked at Michael. Who wrote this? My father. Karen looked away. He helped us start the company. Judge Judy nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes wisdom arrives long before people understand why they'll need it. Karen suddenly leaned forward. This is ridiculous. She pointed toward Michael. He wants sympathy because he's sentimental. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. No, she replied calmly. He brought records. She paused. You brought excuses. The words landed like stone. Karen's attorney shifted uncomfortably. He had spent the entire hearing believing this would be a routine business dispute. Now it was becoming something much more dangerous. Judge Judy glanced toward the plain white evidence box sitting beside the clerk. She finally rested both hands on it. Everything we've discussed explains motive. She looked first at Michael, then at Karen. But motive isn't proof. Karen smiled again, a small smile. The first she'd managed in nearly 20 minutes. Exactly. Judge Judy nodded. You're right. Karen relaxed. Then Judge Judy finished the sentence. That's why we're finally going to watch the warehouse footage. Karen's smile vanished. Her attorney slowly turned toward her. Karen! His voice was barely above a whisper. Is there anything on those recordings I need to know before they're played? Karen didn't answer, because she suddenly remembered something far worse than changing the locks. 48 hours after locking Michael out, she had entered that warehouse after midnight, and she hadn't been alone. Judge Judy rested both hands on the plain white evidence box. The courtroom became so quiet that the soft click of the latch echoed across the room. Karen Holloway stared at the box without blinking. 5 minutes earlier, she had laughed at Judge Judy's warning. Now, she couldn't even look comfortable in her own chair. Judge Judy removed a sealed flash drive along with a chain of custody certificate from the warehouse security company. She read the certification aloud. The recordings were extracted directly from the warehouse surveillance server. No edits, no missing timestamps, verified under penalty of perjury. She nodded once. The court accepts the footage. Karen's attorney slowly leaned toward her. This is your last opportunity. Karen kept her eyes on the table. I've done nothing wrong. Judge Judy didn't respond. She simply handed the drive to the clerk. Please play camera 4. The courtroom monitor flickered to life. The timestamp appeared. Asked 11:58 p.m. The warehouse was empty. Rows of neatly stacked merchandise stretched across the screen. Nothing moved. Judge Judy allowed nearly 30 seconds of silence. Then, at exactly asked 12:07 a.m., the loading dock door opened. Karen walked inside. She wasn't alone. 2 men followed behind her wearing plain work jackets with no company logos. Michael frowned. I've never seen them before. Judge Judy kept watching. Karen unlocked the inventory office. She handed one of the men a clipboard. Then she pointed towards several pallets stacked near the back wall. No one in the courtroom spoke. There was no audio. There didn't need to be. Body language often says what words try to hide. The workers immediately began loading unopened cartons onto rolling pallets. Judge Judy paused the footage. She turned toward Karen. Who are these men? Karen answered quickly. Temporary movers. Employed by whom? My logistics contractor. Judge Judy looked down at the file. I don't see any invoices. Karen hesitated. They billed us later. Judge Judy calmly made a note. Then she resumed the video. For the next 20 minutes, pallet after pallet disappeared through the loading dock. Michael stared at the screen. His face slowly lost all color. Those were our holiday shipments. Judge Judy nodded. The inventory reports indicate those products were later listed as missing. Michael quietly answered, because they were. Karen folded her arms tightly. They were transferred. Judge Judy immediately paused the footage again. Transferred where? Karen swallowed. Another warehouse. Judge Judy asked the question so calmly that almost nobody realized it was a trap. Excellent. She folded her hands. Please tell the court the address. Karen froze. Her attorney looked toward her. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Judge Judy waited. Experienced judges know innocent people usually answer simple questions. People hiding something often search for complicated explanations. Karen finally whispered, "I don't remember." Judge Judy nodded. "Interesting." She reached into the evidence box again. This time she removed a printed logistics report. "I do." The courtroom became perfectly still. Judge Judy held up the document. The GPS records from the delivery truck show it never traveled to another company warehouse. Karen's attorney slowly closed his eyes. Judge Judy continued. "It drove to a commercial storage facility rented." She turned one page. Under a limited liability company created only 11 days before these recordings. Karen looked visibly shaken. Judge Judy calmly asked, "Would you like to tell the court who owns Hollow Creek Holdings, LLC?" Karen's breathing became uneven. "I do." Michael looked stunned. "You rented another warehouse?" Karen said nothing. Judge Judy answered instead. "Not another warehouse." She held up the lease agreement. A private storage facility. The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Judy allowed the room to settle. Then she looked directly at Karen. "You locked your partner out." She pointed toward the paused footage. "You removed company inventory in the middle of the night." She lifted the lease agreement. "And you placed it into a storage facility controlled only by you." Karen's attorney quietly whispered. "Karen," his voice cracked. "Please tell me that's the whole story." Karen slowly closed her eyes. "It isn't." Judge Judy noticed. The confidence that had filled the courtroom only minutes earlier was completely gone. Real fear doesn't always tremble. Sometimes it simply stops pretending. Judge Judy reached into the evidence box one final time. There was one remaining envelope, smaller than the others. Inside it was a single bank statement connected to the same storage company. If it matched the warehouse footage, Karen hadn't just hidden the inventory. She had already started selling it. The courtroom didn't move. Karen Holloway stared at the unopened bank statement as though she already knew what it contained. Judge Judy noticed. People who are innocent usually wonder what's inside an envelope. People who are guilty often fear they've already guessed correctly. She broke the seal. Inside was a certified statement from Hollow Creek Holdings, LLC, a company that, according to public records, had existed for less than 2 weeks before the midnight warehouse transfer. Judge Judy quietly reviewed the first page, then the second. Without changing her expression, she slid the statement toward the clerk. "Please place this on the monitor." The screen changed. A list of deposits appeared, large deposits, one after another, each labeled with invoice numbers. Michael leaned forward. His eyes widened. "I know those numbers." Judge Judy looked at him. "How? There are product codes." The courtroom fell silent. Michael pointed toward the screen. "Those aren't random invoices." His voice cracked. "They're from our Christmas inventory." Judge Judy nodded. The dates matched perfectly. The inventory disappeared from the warehouse. 48 hours later, payments began arriving in Hollow Creek Holdings' account. Karen's attorney slowly removed his glasses. "When were these products sold?" Judge Judy answered by pointing to the statement. "The first shipment left the storage facility 3 days after Mr. Bennett was locked out." Karen covered her mouth. The gallery erupted into whispers. Judge Judy allowed the room to settle before asking one quiet question. "Mrs. Holloway." Karen didn't look up. "Did Mr. Bennett authorize these sales?" "No." "Did he receive any portion of the proceeds?" "No." "Did you tell him the inventory had been moved?" Karen's voice was barely audible. "No." Judge Judy folded her hands. "So while telling your business partner that inventory was being reviewed," she paused, "you were already selling it." Karen closed her eyes. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Truth doesn't always arrive with dramatic speeches. Sometimes it arrives as numbers on a bank statement. Judge Judy reached for one final exhibit. Unlike the financial records, it wasn't a business document. It was a printed email sent from Karen to one of the buyers. She read it aloud. Please remove all references to Bennett Home Decor from future invoices. Use Hollow Creek Holdings only. Michael slowly lowered his head. He didn't cry. He simply stared at the old brass warehouse key, still resting beside his leather case, the key that no longer opened the building he had helped create. Judge Judy looked toward Karen. Why, Karen finally looked up. For the first time all day, there was no confidence, no rehearsed explanation, no sarcasm. I thought. She stopped. Judge Judy waited. I thought if the business failed, Karen whispered. I could save part of it, Judge Judy answered quietly. No. She pointed toward the monitor. You weren't saving the business. You were separating yourself from your partner while taking assets that belonged to both of you. Karen began to cry. I never meant for everything to fall apart. Judge Judy's voice remained calm. It didn't fall apart, she paused. You dismantled it. Those words echoed through the courtroom. Karen's attorney leaned toward her one final time. Karen, he spoke gently. Is there anything else the court hasn't seen? Karen looked at the bank records, then at Michael. Finally, she nodded. There is. Judge Judy watched carefully. What is it? Karen swallowed hard. I emptied the business operating account the morning after changing the locks. Michael looked up in disbelief. What? Karen's tears fell freely now. I transferred everything that was left. Judge Judy didn't interrupt. How much? Karen closed her eyes. Just over $312,000. A collective gasp spread through the courtroom. Even the bailiff looked stunned. Michael slowly sat back in his chair. The missing inventory, the changed locks, the secret warehouse, the hidden company. Now, the emptied bank account, the simple partnership dispute, had become something much darker. Judge Judy quietly closed the evidence folder. She looked directly at Karen. The evidence is complete. She glanced once at Michael, then back at the court file. The next words she spoke wouldn't simply decide who won the lawsuit. They would determine whether Karen walked out of the courtroom owing damages, or whether the evidence needed to be referred for a much more serious investigation. The courtroom remained silent. No one spoke after Karen admitted she had transferred more than $312,000 from the business account. The number seemed to hang in the air. Judge Judy slowly closed the evidence folder. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. There is a difference. Anger fades. Disappointment is earned. Karen stared at the table. 5 minutes earlier, she had laughed at Judge Judy's warning. Now, every piece of evidence had confirmed exactly what the judge already suspected. Judge Judy folded her hands. Mrs. Holloway. Karen looked up through tears. You entered this courtroom claiming you were the victim. Yes. You claimed Mr. Bennett destroyed your reputation by filing this lawsuit. Karen nodded weakly. Judge Judy looked down at the exhibits spread across the bench. The evidence tells a very different story. She picked up the partnership agreement. You changed the warehouse locks without your partner's written consent. She placed it aside. Next came the security footage. You removed jointly owned inventory after midnight while your partner had been locked out. She reached for the bank records. You sold that inventory through a separate company you secretly created. Finally, she lifted the financial statement. And you emptied the business operating account without informing the person who legally owned half of it. The courtroom remained perfectly still. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen. This wasn't poor management. She paused. It wasn't confusion. She tapped the stack of evidence. It was a calculated plan. Karen broke down completely. I thought I could fix everything before he found out. Judge Judy answered quietly. People rarely destroy everything with one bad decision. She looked toward Michael. They destroy it by convincing themselves the next dishonest choice will solve the last one. Michael never celebrated. He simply sat quietly, holding the old brass warehouse key in his hand. Judge Judy noticed. Some people come to court wanting revenge. Others simply want someone to finally acknowledge what was taken from them. She turned toward him. Mr. Bennett, yes, Your Honor. The evidence overwhelmingly supports your claims. She reviewed the documented losses one final time, the missing inventory, the unauthorized transfers, the dissolved contracts, the frozen operating account, the financial damage to your business. She looked back at Karen. Judgment is entered in favor of Mr. Bennett. Karen closed her eyes. Judge Judy continued. You are ordered to pay damages in the amount of $398,600, representing documented business losses, converted inventory, and associated financial harm. A quiet gasp swept through the courtroom. Karen's attorney slowly lowered his head. There was nothing left to argue. The evidence had answered every question. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. She carefully closed the file before delivering the sentence that no one in that courtroom would ever forget. Greed always believes one more lie will save it, but truth keeps better financial records than deceit ever can. No one moved. Judge Judy continued calmly. Based upon the evidence presented today, including the secret company, the inventory transfers, and the admitted movement of partnership funds, the clerk will forward this record to the appropriate civil and law enforcement authorities for whatever review they determine is appropriate. Karen covered her face. She finally understood. She hadn't lost because of one mistake. She had lost because every attempt to hide the first mistake created another. Michael quietly reached into the old leather document case. Inside was the faded photograph taken years earlier in front of their first empty warehouse. He looked at it one last time, then placed it back beside the brass key. Judge Judy noticed. You kept that through all of this. Michael nodded. It reminds me why I started. Judge Judy gave a small, respectful nod. Don't let what happened here make you forget that. Within 24 hours of the ruling, several suppliers contacted Michael after learning the truth, offering to reopen accounts that had been suspended during the dispute. Within 48 hours, former employees who had quietly resigned came forward with additional records supporting the financial timeline already established in court. Within 72 hours, Michael signed the lease on a smaller warehouse. Not because he had recovered everything, but because he finally had something more valuable than inventory. He had his name back. Karen's business quietly dissolved in the months that followed. Not because Judge Judy humiliated her, because the evidence removed every place left to hide. The narrator reflected on why this fictional courtroom story stayed with so many people. It wasn't really about warehouse keys. It wasn't about inventory. It wasn't even about nearly $400,000. It was about one dangerous belief. That confidence can outrun documentation. Karen laughed when Judge Judy warned her. She believed 5 minutes of confidence could overcome years of recorded facts. Instead, those same 5 minutes became the reason she lost everything she had worked to control. Truth is patient. It doesn't argue. It doesn't chase applause. It simply waits for the moment when every excuse runs out. If this story reminded you that honesty is always a stronger investment than deception, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more unforgettable courtroom stories, and share it with someone who believes accountability still matters. And tell us in the comments, at what exact moment did you realize Karen's case was beyond saving?